All right, happy Friday, everybody. This is Jen. We are here for our 16th installment of Automation Hour. Let me advance the slides here. All right. For those of you joining us for the first time, we meet every other Friday, 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern, and our lineup here, we have a bunch of MVPs and community members, so we're excited for that. And if you have a cool automation hour idea, please submit it to our site. So all lines are muted. Please use the chat function to ask questions, and continue to submit any questions to the success community after the session, and we will post the recording post session. And here's a shout out to our sponsor, Concrete.io. Here are your co-hosts, Rakesh, David, and Jen. And this was taken at Southeast Streaming last week. And with that, I am going to hand it over to Ian.
Hi there, Jen, Rakesh, David. Thank you for inviting me to come and talk to the Automation Hour. I'm looking at a slide that still says Automation Hour, so I haven't seen the slides move on.
Yep, hold on. Just give me a sec while I hand it off. Okay. Sure. Right,
should have it now. Yeah.
Should have control. Does that hand off properly?
Yeah. Okay, right. So, thank you. Let's get rid of that. And present. There we go. Right. So there's, again, a shout out to the sponsors, and there's the team who tirelessly put these sessions together every other week. Amazing work. Thanks, guys. So as I said, I'm Ian Gotts. I've been a customer since 2002, which makes me very old. It also means that it was easy when I started. There were only accounts, leads, contacts, and I don't think they even had opportunities. And we built out quite a lot out of Force.com because there was no app exchange and there were no applications that we could go and install. Life is very different now. Life is probably more complicated for all of you as Salesforce admins. The scope of the projects is bigger, the challenges you're trying to face for your customers are bigger, and therefore I think what I want to talk about is how you will be able to use business analysis to really make sense of what you're trying to do with Salesforce. Again, contacts there. I've got a blog. I'm reasonably active on Twitter. Go and find me on LinkedIn, and the company website's Elements.Cloud. So this is all about you. This is about not just what you can build for your company, but it's how you can build your career. So there was some research by Burning Glass Technologies that Salesforce did last year, and they discovered, having looked at thousands of job vacancies in the Salesforce space, that business analysis was the #1 skill that employers were looking for Salesforce admins, and it's in short supply. So therefore, this session is not just about what you can do for your company, but what you can do for your career. So, which is exciting. Everything we're going to talk about is in an ebook which we have written, a free ebook which you can download. There'll be a link at the end, so if you don't need to feverishly take notes. Everything we talk about is going to be in there to make life easy. So, if you think about business analysis and process mapping, your goal as an admin is to obviously to make your company run better, is to make sure that your users are way more efficient in terms of the way they use Salesforce. And process mapping allows you to figure out how to do that, to really understand the end-to-end process flows, to understand how Salesforce can be exploited, whether it's you're just getting started and therefore probably you're starting in Lightning, whether you've got an existing implementation you're looking to upgrade to Lightning, or whether you're just trying to improve your current implementation inside Classic. So all the things in that list can be achieved through business analysis and process mapping. And what I'm going to do is we're going to talk about some principles, but then I'm going to show you how I would run a live workshop. So this is real sort of practical stuff that you can do on Monday morning or even at the weekend if you wanted to, and get started with. This is not something you need to spend hours learning. This stuff I think you'll be able to pick up relatively quickly, and that's certainly what we've seen. And I've been around this space for probably the last 20 years. So there are lots of ways you can process map. You could stand at a whiteboard, sketch out on a whiteboard, sketch on a piece of paper, or you could use some software. I'm going to show you using some software called Elements.Cloud, which we've developed. First point though, this is not a product demo with a sales pitch at the end of it. Elements.Cloud is a free application that's tightly integrated into Salesforce. So there's no cost for user licenses forever. So it's free for as many users as you want forever. It's based on a previous company which we built over about 15 years. So the principles are well proven. To a certain extent, this is our second go. So I think we're doing a better job of building a really elegant application, which really works well for that business analysis. So as I said, there'll be a link at the end if you want to download it and use it. The things I'm going to talk about, you don't have to use. You could use Visio, PowerPoint, Lucidchart if you wanted to. We just think Elements is probably a better answer, and it's integrated into Salesforce. So you can map processes. So how would we go about it? Well, as I said, there's a book that explains the detail of with a couple of URLs there, and then the link to download the application. The book describes some principles around process mapping and business analysis. It's not a book about the product, but a book about principles, which is what I want to go through now. So when people talk about process, often that's what people imagine. Horrible wiring diagrams that are probably only intelligible to the IT and techies out there. And that's not what I want to talk. That's not what I would describe a business analysis type process map, because we need to design a process map which is understandable for a wide range of people. It's the end users, your customers, it's your senior management who need to sign off on say the approach. It could be your consultants or your developers who need to turn it into code. It could be your compliance guys who need to prove to the regulators that you're following due process. So this is a technical diagram. This is not what we're talking about. The next slide you've got there, that's a photograph I took at a client. Now, yes, I guess that's more business oriented, but these things printed out on a wall and expecting people to sign them off, again, just doesn't work in the virtual world or the virtual organizations we work in. So there's got to be a better way, an easier way to make this stuff easily understood by a wide audience. So if I look at, say, a diagram like that, these massive flowcharts that people draw, how can I make that easily understood so I can grasp it relatively easily? And the way we do that is we build out a hierarchy of diagrams rather than having one massive diagram. So let's build out a structure. So let's take this diagram and instead replace it with this one. I think I could understand that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 boxes. I can see the flow. I can understand how it works. But I'm concerned now that I've lost all that important detail. But the hierarchical structure means we haven't. If I go to the next slide, you can see that each one of those activity boxes at the high level has a diagram below it, and that could have further diagrams below that. So you can build out that hierarchy of diagrams so that at every level you're only looking at about 8 to 10 boxes, so you can really understand it in one glance. And if I think back to the previous company we ran, we had clients, or one client who had 10,000 diagrams in the hierarchy. And you go, well, Ian, that's nuts. Why would you need something so big? Well, they were a global bank, so they were a retail bank, they were an investment bank, they were wealth management, and they were highly regulated, which meant they had to write down everything and prove that their staff were following it, everywhere from setting strategy right down to issuing a checkbook or replacing a stolen credit card. And these diagrams, these were the operations manual. They were the single source of truth. This is what they used to demonstrate to the regulators. They used it to train their staff. So I think the other thing is the content we're going to create is more than just project documentation. It lives beyond the project. It is, as I said, the operations manual, it's the compliance manual, but it's also the place that you go back to when you want to do some improvements or some changes to Salesforce. So if you're going back and thinking about implementing a new module or taking advantage of the Spring 17 features or upgrading to Lightning, if you had this or already have this, then you've got a place to go back and look at and go, right, these are the areas we can improve. So let's see how this looks in practice. We've got a very simple building block, and we've found that this has worked over the years. You don't need lots of different shapes. You don't need lots of different styles. A simple building block that says, when does something happen? What's the trigger? What happens? And we'd start that with a verb, typically. Process this, validate this, change this, whatever. So starting with a verb. And then an outcome, why we've done it. And then if we want to understand who is responsible or what systems are used, then there's the who below there. And then in the top left-hand corner, you can see a little corner that is colored in. That shows that there is another diagram below. So if I click on that, I can then drill down to the next level, down through the hierarchy. And then on the right-hand side, you can see there's a paperclip. And that paperclip allows me to link to things. So things you've already developed inside your organization. So links to videos, links to PowerPoint decks, links to training materials, links to Salesforce screens. So launch a screen or launch a process builder flow from an activity. So this activity is not just describing what it does, what things happen, it's also the links or the signposts to all the valuable content you already have inside your organization. It's just trying to make sense or give it some context. So here's an example. I'm hungry, that's the trigger. I get bread, I go to the cupboard, the sous chef does that. I put bread in the toaster and I come out with toast. So very simple flow there. And you can see how at the next level, you could broaden the scope. This is about running a cafe. I advertise it. I get guests, I create a menu. The menu requires me to go and buy food. Ingredients and orders means I serve breakfast. So somewhere that making toast must sit somewhere below that box called serve breakfast. I don't need to worry about making toast at this level. I'm just worried about how I run a cafe. So that idea of hiding the detail down in the levels so I don't get confused or I don't have too much information to look at is a really powerful structure, a really powerful concept, and can be applied at every level, whether it's simply looking at the sales process or you're looking at the entire quote to cash process or the entire sale to order process. So I think all of you can understand that concept and could think about how you could apply that. What I want to do now is actually do a little bit of live process mapping so you could see how we have been running workshops, I said, over the last 20 years, so that just the principles of process mapping and how you'd apply it to something directly. Now, I've got 6 companies at Dreamforce last year and a couple of world tours and also at some user groups. We used to roll a dice and then wherever the number ended up, we would map out one of those companies just to prove that it wasn't a pre-canned demo. We were actually doing it live. Now, I'll roll the virtual dice, and I don't know, let's pick one, I don't know. How you plan and run a Dreamforce at the highest level. Obviously, we haven't got time to do the whole of Dreamforce. I think there are probably 300 people in the team running Dreamforce. But let's map out how you would prepare for and the high level of running a large event like Dreamforce. So let's do some live process mapping. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go across to Elements, which is this our application. A couple of little things. I'll get rid of that. So a couple of things. Elements has got this concept of spaces, so workspaces. So you could have a number of workspaces, I know, client X, client Y, project X, project Y. So you've got one login, and you can keep the work separated. So if you're doing work for if you're a consultancy doing some work for a client, you may have a number of workspaces per client. If you are working for a company, you probably only have one space, or maybe you have a second space where you're doing some sort of playing with some different ideas. So I've got my one space called Salesforce Integration Demo, and inside that space I've got some maps, a map being that hierarchy of diagrams. So let me go and create a new one, and we're going to call this Automation Station, and I'll use the default style. I'm going to create a map, and that map starts with a top level diagram. So it's going to open up the diagram editor for me, hopefully, and then we can start doing some mapping. So there we go. Let's move that out of the way. Right. So the first thing and the most important thing when we're doing any mapping is to make sure we agree the scope. So let's decide what the output is and decide what the input is. And maybe I'll put some I've got a sticky note there so I can put some notes about what it is. Now, this isn't going to be very interactive, so it's just me sitting on my own. But if you were running this as a live workshop, and as we have done in the past, often there is quite a lot of debate about the scope. So if we say this is all about running Dreamforce, when are we saying that the Dreamforce is complete? It could be actually when the last delegate has left Moscone. That might be one definition of when we leave, when the end of it is. But equally well, it could be, we could take a different view that, no, that's not true. It's not when the last delegate has left Moscone. Instead, it's actually when all of Moscone centers are cleared. So that means that we've broken down all the stands and the place is empty. Now, it doesn't matter what we agree, but we all need to agree it's the same thing. So let's assume it's when, I don't know, all the Moscone centers are cleared, and we could put some criteria on that, or some key performance indicators, which is, I know, all stands broken down, all materials cleared. We could even say it's when Howard Street is back to normal. So for those of you who have attended Dreamforce, Salesforce takes over the whole of Howard Street and turns it into the huge Dream Park, which is amazing. But at some point, it does make its way back to being a real street with traffic lights and traffic driving up and down it. So then the other question is, let's focus on when does the event start? Well, let's say when we have a venue and date agreed. And again, it doesn't matter what the start date, the start of the process is, provided everyone who's in that workshop agrees. And we're pretty solid about this. We won't do any mapping unless we are clear about the start and finish. I think I wrote an article that says that a serial killer of all projects is lack of scope control, and I passionately believe that. Unless you've got a clear understanding about the scope, then the project is not doomed, but you're going to struggle. So we've now got a start and a finish date. Start and finish date, I'm sorry. We have a start situation, and we know when we're finished. And now I can start dragging some activity boxes on. So I just drag that on. And let's say the first item, starting with a verb, is say plan and agree strategy. And agree strategy. And we might say, who's going to do that? Well, I could add a resource to that. And let's say there's a planning manager. Well, there's no one there. probably it's actually, maybe there's a VP of Dreamforce. What a cool title that would be. And that we haven't got one of those in our database, so we'll add it. It's a human. There we go. And we probably actually, I'm sure Mark has a view on that, so we'll add him. Although typically you wouldn't add individuals by name. You often add things by role as people change. I think we're probably safe with putting Mark in there as a somebody who's going to be around for a while. So what happens after that? Well, I could just double click, go and add some more activities. We probably need to design the venue, stroke, building, show floor. Sorry about that. I have a slightly dyslexic keyboard this morning. Right, second thing is we probably need to agree speakers. We need to market the event. I think you're getting the hang of this in terms of we're basically brainstorming out the sort of activities, and typically we will be doing this getting the input from obviously our business users. So designing the show floor, maybe there's a resource there. Maybe at that level it's VP of Dreamforce. See, I type VP and it's given me the list of those VPs it can find in the resource list. So we'll add that one. Market the event, maybe the resource we're going to add to that is, let's say it's VP Marketing. Oh, that's good. The other thing we need to do is we need to make sure we sell sponsor slots. Sell sponsorships. So we'll probably add a resource there of VP Sales. There we go. And I can just draw some lines between all of these. All right, there we go. From there to there, there to there. In fact, probably actually, yes. Let's move all these out a bit. There we go. Right. And I could just continue adding boxes and lines. And again, so we could, and maybe we've got something else. Let's put something else. We're going to have agree VIP event. No, not agree. Let's say we're going to plan our VIP event. So we've got our executives also get to go to a different area. So we've got maybe a budget for our VIP event. And again, we can put some lines going back into there, and let's make that activity, which we'll call Run Dreamforce. And then breakdown event. And let's just move those up a bit. It's not it. Stick that in there, move that up there. And then we'll do it like that. And we can see there's no such thing as a piece of paper of a certain size. You can find, if I wanted to put more stuff in there, that I can keep on drilling out and drilling out and drilling out in terms of being able to see things. But now you can see almost at one level very clearly, yeah, absolutely, we know what's happening here. We can see we've got strategy, we've got some key themes of work, of things that are happening, and you can see the flow. So we may have a budget going in there, and coming out of here we have a stands ready to be delivered. So you can now start to see how we're scoping out any one of those. So if I drilled down below design, venue and show floor, I'm starting with a budget, and maybe I've got a budget and a theme, and I'm coming out with stands ready to be delivered. So this shows that this design venue is more than just design. It's probably design and build, and all we're doing is we're shipping it to the Dreamforce event to be built. So with this activity, I could do a number of things. I could attach a note to this, which talks about the theme. So this is the theme, or this is how we're going to decide on the theme. So I could attach some notes to this particular. I could attach maybe a URL, which could be the list of contractors, HTTP, and it could well be something, it could be a Google file, it could be equally well, we could have built a custom application inside Salesforce for tracking everything we're doing inside building the stand or managing the contractors. So maybe there's something here in terms of, maybe there's a Salesforce URL there which we go and attach. So suddenly this activity called design the show floor, we know who's responsible for it. We've got on the right hand side, you can now see some notes called themes, a list of contractors, maybe the app we've built in Salesforce about how we manage contractors. Though what's interesting now is if I right mouse click and drill down new, at the next level down, you can now see that I already have my inputs and outputs. I've already got the scope agreed for the workshop that I need to run with the VP of Dreamforce to think about how we work with our contractors. So again, I could drag some boxes out, or I could double click to do some boxes. And this is now the process for working with the contractors to build, design and build a stand. And we know it starts with a budget and a theme on the left there. And we know it is finished when we have stands ready to be delivered. Not when they've designed them, but not when they've built them, but when they are built, ready to be shipped. Which means if I go back up a level to the diagram above it, I know that when we start running Dreamforce, one of the inputs is the stands ready to be delivered. So surely the first step in the run Dreamforce underneath there is going to be build the stands, build the show. It's not just when the delegates first arrive. So you can start to see how powerful having inputs, a verb, attachments, and an output is. Often we see activities or process diagrams where it's just a series of set of boxes that says marketing, sales, speakers, and that's not enough information. Agree speakers is a lot more powerful than just saying speaker management. We also need to know what the input is to that particular box around speakers. Is it, do we already have a theme? What are we starting that activity with? So often you see just boxes, or we see boxes with lines between boxes and no text on them. That's just as bad. I need to know what the input is. Agree speakers, am I starting that with an agreed theme? Am I starting that with a short list of speakers? Am I starting that with an agreed agenda? All of those are very different. So it's really important that we have text on the lines. And the same is true for text on the output. When have we agreed the speaker? Not when they've said yes, but maybe it's when they've got a signed off speaker form. Or maybe actually for running Dreamforce, that activity is only finished when we've already reviewed their script, reviewed their presentation, and done the two walkthroughs. So again, we need to be really specific, and it makes life a lot easier when we start getting a lot more accurate on that. So what have I talked about? I've talked about the mapping, I've talked about the idea of attaching things, whether it's notes or URLs. But there's one other thing I can do. We could also attach metadata. So we could think about additional data that we need that helps make sense of these processes. And we've got a concept called data tables. It's the idea you could create a form and attach a form to any activity box. You could, again, if you weren't using Elements, you could use it as an Excel spreadsheet and somehow link the Excel spreadsheet to the box you've drawn in PowerPoint. But let me just show you the sorts of things I'm talking about. So we call it a data table. I've got a number of data tables, a number of forms that I've built, very easy to build. It's simply drag and drop some fields onto a form. Let's make this very topical. I've got a form called Lightning Readiness. I want to attach it to that activity called Manage Contractors. And again, I can add the form. I can add a record, multiple records. Are we lightning ready? The answer is, well, no, we're not. Target release is summer 2017. Business benefit is we want third-party contractors to access Salesforce Cloud. Changes required. I know maybe we actually need implement Salesforce 1 and new compact layouts. I just added that record. You could, again, that record could be anything. It could be what are the customer touch points? What are the key metrics that are associated with this process? So you could create any, and you could add a number of forms. So I could, to this activity box, I could also add another little form and collect some data around, say, key performance indicators. So what are the key performance indicators for this step? So I think it could be on budget. Unit could be in terms of money. It could also be in terms of number of change requests, which is just a straight number. I could put some commentary about that. So great way of collecting that additional data associated with any activity. So let's just do one other thing. If we look back down this planned VIP event, I know that one of the team, who's fantastic, Alyssa, she has actually gone and already built some of the stuff around identifying the VIPs. So I could, instead of drill down new and creating a new diagram, I could import a whole series of content, some boxes, in fact a whole map with a structure called Research Customer. So she's already built that, and that's about identifying which VIP should be coming to our event. So what it did is it copied all that content in underneath. If I click on that, you can see she's done a fantastic job. She's already completed it with all the correct lines. I see that there are a series of attachments. Oh, I see she's also created some lightning readiness information about each of these different steps. Fantastic. So one of the things I can do is I could go back up to my top level. And if I wanted to just take a view on, say, lightning readiness, I could run a quick report and say, for this, I'd like a data table. I'd like to tell me all the lightning readiness data for not just this diagram, but every diagram below it. So the ones that I drill down to, but the ones that Alyssa created, and also the levels below that. So if I run that report, and that little bell will light up when the report's ready, which it is. Fantastic. So if I now look at the report, wow, that's quite big. Let's just turn it back to a sensible size. You can now see that I've got 6 different records in there. It tells me which diagram the data is in, and I could even sort by which items are lightning ready and which aren't, or maybe sort them by target release. So again, quite powerful. This is the data we're seeing, which was attached to each of these activity boxes. Just there was some we put some data into this design box, and there was some more data that was probably put under Plan VIP. So what I've just talked about is the ability to very quickly create a little form, attach the form to one of these boxes, and then collect data and then report on it, aggregate all that data so we get a better picture across our process about, in this case, lightning readiness, or what are the key performance metrics we need to capture, and therefore we need to go and find them. So I've done a sort of a quick sprint through some of the functionality that I think you should be looking at using, whether it's in Elements or PowerPoint, Lucidchart, Excel combined, so that you can start to have a sensible conversation with your business users. So instead of them coming in and saying, oh, Pete, can you just run me this report? Or we need another field added. You can sit them down and say, okay, let me understand what you're trying to achieve. Okay, so you actually want to be able to drive better partner awareness. Great, and you need a different field. So let's understand the partner awareness process. What are the 4 or 5 steps? How's that field used? And suddenly you've got a lot better information. And maybe they don't need the field. Maybe you already have the functionality inside that you've already built in Salesforce for them to support their process they just didn't understand. Or maybe in mapping it out, you realize that you could do a lot better if you, once you designed the process, you could then turn it into a process builder flow and automate a lot of it, which would improve the quality of the data. So this mapping approach will work whether it's at a very detailed level or it's a high level. We're implementing a configure price quote. So the principles work of activity boxes, lines, attaching things, thinking about the resources, who's responsible. All of that is critically important when you're starting to think about these process flows. And everything that I've talked about is part of, in Elements, is free. For as many users as you want, forever. That is literally forever, and we're committed to that. So that's great. Now, wouldn't it be nice if you could see this inside Salesforce? Well, also part of the free offering is that we have an integration into Salesforce. You can install the free Salesforce integration package, and that will give you 3 tabs. The first tab is the settings page, and what you need to do through settings is you would log in and you would connect your org with a space. So if you remember at the very beginning, we identified a number of different spaces that you could create. So you might create your production space and collect in Elements, and then connect it to your org, and you do it on this page. You can then set up all the users so that every user in Salesforce is automatically a free user in Elements, so that they can use their Salesforce credentials for logging into Elements. So they immediately get access to the content. And then you can decide which diagrams you want people to have access to. So the first thing is we have something called an Elements map. That tab is simply a custom object which you can edit if you want to. And all we've done is created a little object where you can type a name in, which was, I know, maybe this is called the name of the diagram. So this is like a diagram shortcut. And then I put the ID of the diagram. And if I go back to my, you don't need to worry, but the top, there's a unique ID for every single diagram, which you can find in the right-hand panel. And if I click Save, it basically creates a little one record in that Elements Maps table object, and sitting below it is the diagram. So there's a shortcut to that particular diagram. And if I go back into Elements itself, and I go and drag, I don't know, a sticky note on there, and drag an activity box on there, and go back to Salesforce, there they are, they've suddenly popped up. So you don't need to do a refresh of a page. If anybody is looking at a page and you've dropped an Elements diagram in, it automatically gets updated. And you can see there, if I have edit rights, I could edit it whilst I'm inside Salesforce, which is really cool. So actually I said, you know what, I don't want those. Let's get rid of that. Let's get rid of that and change some text. And I can do that inside Salesforce. So that's the first thing. I can just give someone a list of diagrams that I want them to access. And again, it's controlled by the access rights that they are given. Obviously, people can only see things that they've been given access to. The other thing I could do is I could drop any diagram into a custom or a standard object. So there's my partner object, and which is a custom object. And there we go. There's a diagram sitting inside a custom object. One thing I would say though, I'm demonstrating this in in Lightning. It works just as well in Classic. So this is not Lightning only. The package I'm talking about will work with Enterprise Edition and above, and it works in both Classic and Lightning. And the way so just to show you how I would set up which diagram appears in an object, I forgot to mention, these are all completely live diagrams. You can navigate up and down, all the things I was doing, looking at data, looking at some notes, all those things work so it's a live diagram, it's not a screenshot. So the question is, how would I set that up? I go to Element Settings, I go to the Objects tab, and there's Partner. So let me go and change that one and replace it with the other ID of the diagram that we were messing around with, our Dreamforce one. I go back to my Partner tab, open up a Partner tab, and hopefully, when I look at the new diagram, it's just loading, and there we go, there's the diagram that we've been drawing. So using the free integration with Salesforce, you can drop in any diagram so that your Salesforce users can understand how they should be using a particular object, whether it's explaining how to go through an opportunity or using a custom object. So that's all part of free. I want to spend just 2 seconds on one thing which isn't free, which people might find interesting, which is, wouldn't it be cool if I could suck all the configuration data, standard objects, workflows, Visualforce pages, and put them in a list so that I can actually add some documentation to them. So the way I do that is I can actually go into Elements, the Element Settings page, and under the Nodes tab, I could decide which items inside my Salesforce configuration I want to synchronize with a list inside Elements. So let me show you what that looks like. Here is the list. Let me cancel on that. Here is the list of things that I've synchronized. This is sitting inside Elements. It's a nested list. Here are all my custom objects. Here is my partner object. Here are the fields for that custom object. Here are, all our Visualforce pages that I've chosen to synchronize. And the way I've got them into this list is by going into that Salesforce page and deciding which things I want to be synchronized. So they're my Visualforce pages. I've chosen 2 out of the 10 pages I want to synchronize across to my list. So that's quite cool. At least I've now got an easy place to find all these things. But now, associated with any item, so let's say this custom object and my partner, I could say to this partner, I could now add attachments just the same way as I was adding attachments to boxes. I could say, what's the reason for this? Well, we want to track our partners in our partner program. I could link to a URL. Maybe there is a link here to, I don't know, the specification that we gave to our consultants when they went and built it. Or maybe there is some third-party documentation in a wiki somewhere, or in a Google Drive or in Box. So suddenly we're starting to add some documentation associated with the partner object, which has been synchronized back into Salesforce. And if I look at that partner object, I've also got this link called Salesforce Setup Page. So if I click on that, it will open up that object inside Salesforce. So I can now look at and edit that object directly inside Salesforce. And then the last thing I could do is I could link this object back to our process diagram and say, where is this object used in our end-to-end process? And I can see it's used in a couple of places, but if I copy the link, I could go back to my diagram and I could say that on this particular step here, design, venue, and showroom, I could add that link. And I could say we are tracking contractors as partners in the partner object. So this describes why we are using that particular object on this particular process step. So let me just go back. I just go and refresh this page. So that link appears, and I go to my custom object, my partner. I can now see here I have got some notes, the reason why I created the partner object. I've got some links maybe to a specification, and I can now see, look, the 3 places that partner object is used in Inform Partner, in Estimate Services, but also there it's also used in the design venue process step. So why is this important? First of all, it's a single place where you can start to document, capture all the documentation for how you've configured your Salesforce org. Secondly, it gives you an opportunity to understand if you change anything in Salesforce. So if I change this partner object, or even at a lower level, I change the field, which processes are affected, which people in my organization are affected. So it could be not just an object, but it could be a report. So where's this report used? Or where's this email template used? So again, starting to get a better handle on, if you change something in Salesforce, what's changed? If we want to go and migrate to Salesforce, okay, who do I need to plan my training for? And you can also go the other way. You could look at any process step in a diagram and see, sorry, wrong diagram. In a diagram, and you could now see that this particular step called Design Venue Workflow uses that partner object. So if I wanted to change the way we were running that process, I would know which things to change back inside Salesforce. So I've got a view in both directions. As I said, that's not part of the free offering. It's billed at $60 a month per Salesforce admin. But it's all enabled the moment you install that Salesforce package. So I've been through quite a lot. Let's try and summarize, and then I'm happy to take any questions. So we've talked about, and I said it's all in the book, but we've talked about the importance of business analysis. I've talked about a simple notation, this idea of input, activity, output, resource, and attachment. And then we've seen how we can build those up into more complex flows, but without complicating things because of this hierarchical structure. And then we looked at how those diagrams could be delivered inside Salesforce so that your business users can use them as the operations manual. Your configuration team can use it as an understanding about how to configure Salesforce. And your compliance guys can use it to demonstrate to the regulators that you're following due process. And then we had a little bit of a look at the one of our pro features, which is the ability to use this content, the Salesforce configuration data, in something we call a reference model inside Elements, and then start to document your org. So you stand a fighting chance in 6 months' time of coming back and understanding why you did something and the impact of any changes. So that's a very quick sprint through what we're doing with Elements. Our plan and objective is that we are building all the tools that Salesforce admins need to go from discovery through to implement, through to operate. So in about a month's time, we're launching a completely free app called Business Requirements Capture, and we're launching a pro feature which is about all the version control, sign-off and version control that people need when they're in a more regulated environment. And we are committed to continue to build out the tools that people need. And we're very open for you guys as Salesforce admins to come and tell us what you need. And if we can build it, and we can get it out of Salesforce through the APIs, then we'll do it. If we can't, then we'll go and chase Salesforce and work out how we can do it. So I said we are completely committed to enabling you as Salesforce admins to do the best job you can. So with that, happy to take any questions. Yeah, I'll do my best to answer them. If we can't answer them immediately, then I'm sure we can post the answers on the success community.
All right. So we do have a question from Randy. Does Elements.Cloud work with all editions of Salesforce?
Great question. It currently works with enterprise upwards. We aren't currently on the App Exchange. Once we get the integration on the App Exchange, I believe then we'll also be able to support professional.
Okay. A question from Stuart. Do you have to start from scratch every time, or like developers, can you start with a template or copy from other users?
Okay, perfect. Great question. So, can I just answer one question from the previous question? So our application Elements.Cloud is a standalone application that runs on AWS. So you don't have to be a Salesforce user, or you can use it beyond the scope of Salesforce. So if you're implementing Workday as well, or SAP. So Elements, the application, sits standalone running on the AWS cloud, and the integration into Salesforce is a package which you would install. So you'd log into Elements first, then install the package. So that's finishing off the last question. Sorry, the first question. The second question is, can you start from, do you have to start with a clean sheet? Absolutely not. We have already pre-built a number of example maps, Sales Cloud, HR, professional services automation. And when you log into Elements, there's something we've called public spaces, where you can go to those public spaces and copy that content in. You also, if you've already built a map in space X and you want to move it into space Y, then absolutely, if you've got rights, you can copy those across. So again, our aim is to, both us and our consulting partners, is to build content that people can use as a starting point. We have been talking to the non-profit group about whether we can build the process maps which explain how the NP, non-profit success pack, how that works. So if you install that package into a non-profit, can we build the process map that explains how that all hangs together? And we're talking to a number of the non-profit MVPs about how we build that out.
Okay, great. Randy has another question. What happens if the admin creates a workspace for the company, integrates it into Salesforce, and then leaves the company? Best practices around workspaces that are company-owned rather than admin-owned?
Okay, so that's a great question. The space that you create, you don't actually own. What that means is that you may be the admin or the person who creates that space. You're an admin in it. You could then go and invite other people as admins. So an example might be if you're a consultant working for a client, that client is, I know, let's say Krispy Kreme donuts. So you create a space called Krispy Kreme. You invite you and your consultants in, or your team in. You then go and invite your client in there. There are 3 or 4 clients in there, and you're all working together, collaborating around the process diagrams. In fact, I didn't really talk about the collaboration piece, but you can collaborate on diagrams as you build out the process map. Come the end of the project, the client goes, great, we'll take it from here. You make some of the client's admins, and then you can excuse yourself, or you can leave that space, and that space is now owned by the client, and they continue to take it. So the space is can move around, and you can change ownership of the space, which means we've designed this really thinking about how companies work with other companies, and that, to put that level of flexibility. You would still keep your login, because your login, obviously, you can access multiple spaces.
Okay. And last question here. Again, if those who have questions, post them out. But there's one from Stuart confirming Salesforce Config Manager is not free, and if it isn't, could you just remind us of the costs again?
Absolutely. So the Config Manager isn't free. Everything before that I talked about was. Config Manager is priced based on the number of Salesforce admins in the space you have connected. And it's priced at $2 a day. So we calculate it based on when you start from a starting point in the month. So if you think about it as $60 a month so if you have 3 Salesforce admins, then you need 3 editor licenses, and those Salesforce guys, those editor licenses, you can do the stuff in Config Manager. You can obviously edit diagrams, create diagrams. So that was number of editors equals the number of Salesforce admins at $60 a month.
Okay. All right. Does anybody else out there have questions? I want to give it a minute. You're typing away. All right. I don't see any additional questions out there, Ian.
Fantastic. So if I can just summarize, business analysis, really critical skill that you as Salesforce admins gain, not just for your companies, but for your careers. Some simple principles and notations that we've proven over the years, all written down in the book. Please download a copy of it, take a look at it. If you have ideas, suggestions, we're really open to hearing those. Happy to continue the conversations. We'll be at Texas Streaming, we're going to be at Midwest Streaming, and we're based out in San Francisco. So if you're out here, then hit us up, and we'd love to meet up with you.
Great. Thanks so much, Ian, for your presentation.
Hey, my pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you, Ian.
And join us in 2 weeks for our session with Zach Otero. So we'll talk to you then. Thanks.